undermining of the United States Constitution being taught in local government schools. These are poison factories, indoctrination centers. So I thought it would be great on Constitution Day to invite back to the program a guest here over many years and often joins us, Mark Meckler, co-founder of the Convention of States Project. And today on Constitution Day, disparaging the United States Constitution. Imagine that. Hey, Mark, welcome back to the Schilling Show.
Hey, great to be with you. And sad to say the disparagement has been going on for a long time from the left.
Well, it has, and it's just awful that we've tolerated this. I think a lot of people just weren't aware this was going on. They're not following closely what's happening in these government schools. And then we look around us, we see a society that's upended by violence and chaos, people voting for other people who proclaim to hate the country, and we shouldn't wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to me. And this is a strain of anti-Americanism that runs deep and long on the left. Literally, if you go all the way back to the Woodrow Wilson administration in the early 1900s, he was openly disdainful of the Constitution and speaking out against the Constitution as a document that was outdated, antiquated, and kept him, literally, and the government from doing the things they wanted to do.
Sounds like one of our Supreme Court justices who favors the South Africa Constitution over the United States Constitution. So how did we get here?
Well, I think we got here by ignoring the founders' warnings, and I think one of the greatest founders, not often talked about, was the first Chief Justice in the United States Supreme Court, John Jay. And John Jay spoke about the Constitution, and he said it's our duty to read it, which I think probably most of your listeners have. And then he said, but that wasn't enough. We had to study it. We had to commit it to memory, essentially, not memorize it, but to really know it. And then we needed to teach it to the next generation. And he said, so that we'll be prepared to defend it against infringements by government. And I think one of the things we've done is we've really failed to teach it. You talked about these indoctrination factories. I call them factories of hate against America. And so what we've done is we don't teach the kids the Constitution or its history in any significant way. So they are not prepared to understand why it's the foundation for liberty and what we need to do to defend it, because it's really up to us.
It certainly is. We're talking with Mark Meckler, the co-founder of the Convention of States Project, disparaging the United States Constitution. So here in Albemarle County, the dictate has gone down. We exposed this, that the superintendent and his minions have demanded that the Constitution be taught as a fundamentally racist document that was built on inequity. And I would love for you to answer, because they're probably listening over there at the school administration building right now. Maybe they need a lesson from Mark Meckler. Go ahead.
Well, what they really need is a lesson from the founders. And if you go back to the Constitutional Convention, obviously that's what we're talking about here today, the celebration of the Constitution. You go back and you look at those debates. You look at Madison's notes, and I've read them, and I would bet that most of the school administrators, if not all of them, have not. Look at the debates in the Federalist Papers. And what the Constitution was doing was it was enshrining fundamental eternal principles. And central among them was the concept, never before espoused in human history in any government form, was the fundamental principle that all men are created equal. It didn't say that there would always be equal outcomes. It didn't say everybody had equal talent. It's that we will all have equal justice before the law. We all get the same shot when we start off according to the law and the system. And that's at the center of our system. It didn't say we'll divide people by race and give people certain advantages or disadvantages. It said all of us are created equal, created, important also, by a creator. And it's important to remember the founders, they were, for the most part, Christians. There are a few deists among them. It was not an atheist culture. It was not a secular culture. And that's part of the place that our school system has gone wrong.
It certainly has. Let's go to the phones here. It's Constitution Day. We're talking to Mark Meckler, co-founder of the Convention of States Project, and we say hello to Greg. Greg, go right ahead with Mark Meckler.
Well, a couple of things. One is, if these people who are elected in office, whether it's local, state, or federal, are sworn to the Constitution to uphold it, and yet they'll legislate gun laws that would not allow you to carry, open carry, or do whatever, is an infringement on the Second Amendment. In my opinion, all I would have to do if I have to go to court is hand the judge a copy of the Constitution and just yellow out the infringement part. And there should be no recourse against me. The other thing is, as far as Convention of States, I really understand why you guys are doing it. I understand it. But what my fears of that is that a liberal constituency would get in a convention of states and erase part of the Constitution? That's my second question. And my third question is, if you run for a political office and you swear by the Constitution, say like the OAC group and all, why, if they're going to run on a socialist ticket with socialism, which is against the Constitution, to me, there should be some recourse where they're actually either committing treason or disbarred from being able to run for office. And I'd just like to get your comment on all three of those points. Thank you.
Yeah, Greg, thank you very much. Three good questions. Let's turn it over to Mark. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's start with the Second Amendment. I just agree with you. I mean, one of the things that is so frustrating to me about the Second Amendment and the way it's been judicially interpreted, it's the most clear, concise, succinct amendment to the United States Constitution. It simply says, shall not infringe, right? Shall not infringe on the right to keep and bear arms. That's pretty easy to understand. Shall not infringe. It doesn't say shall only infringe reasonably or shall infringe on a limited basis or shall infringe as a particular government wants to say, shall not infringe. So I think that the vast majority of laws regulating gun possession in the United States of America should be unconstitutional. Unfortunately, we have a long jurisprudence that's changed that. This points to a fundamental problem with the United States Supreme Court. They were originally there. They weren't supposed to have the ultimate authority over what constitutional interpretation was. As I read the founders, they expected all three branches would have equal authority over that, but they have become supreme. These men and women in robes, they make the decisions for us. So I think fundamentally we have a jurisdictional problem. The Supreme Court has overstepped its jurisdiction. In regard to Convention of States, what you're bringing up is the classical sort of fear about a Convention of States. It's called the runaway convention argument, the idea that we would get in convention, the left would take over, and they would do things to our Constitution we wouldn't like. It's important to know where that argument comes from. It originally comes from Chief Justice Warren Burger, the man who was the Chief Justice when we got Roe versus Wade. He said it in response to a question about a movement at the time to overturn Roe versus Wade. And what he was trying to do was create fear among people on the right like us, people who believe that we should use the Constitution to save the Constitution. He wanted to stop them from doing it. So he invented this idea of the runaway convention. It had never been spoken before about in American history and is literally as propaganda of the left. You can go to our website. You can get more thorough information on this. Read an article by Daniel Horowitz. And Horowitz writes about this is a long-term propaganda campaign of the left to keep us from doing it. And the logical answer is this. It takes 38 states to ratify any amendment. I've offered millions of people this offer. Go figure out an amendment you or I wouldn't like, and then show me the 38 states that will pass it. I've literally made that offer to millions of people. I've never received one email on it. By the way, my email is mmeckler, MMECKLER, at cosaction.com. That's a challenge. If you think you can do it, draft an amendment, show me the 38 states that will pass it, an amendment you or I wouldn't like. So there's two of them, Kurt. What was the third question?
Okay, so the third one was people that are swearing an oath to the Constitution and they're violating it wantonly, like the AOC and the rest of them, should be pursued for treason.
Yeah, I don't know about treason. I don't think that fits the definition of treason, but I do think that we should start taking oaths of office much more seriously. Mm-hmm. To me, at this point, an oath of office is just what I would describe as a legal nicety. It doesn't really mean anything, and we don't enforce them, and I think we ought to. The place I would enforce them even more than against elected officials is against the judiciary. They take an oath to uphold the Constitution. In a lot of cases, they outright go against the Constitution. They issue decisions that are in no way tied to what the Constitution says. I would like to see us start impeaching some federal judges. I think if you want the judiciary to start behaving in its proper role, we start impeaching members of the federal judiciary who don't follow the Constitution.
Mark Meckler is our guest. We got a little time before the break here. Let's go right to it with Jordan. Thanks for hanging on.
Thanks. I was thinking here, glad I had some time to think. First off, people who don't like the Constitution forget, and when it was conceived, forget that the Constitution has had some major amendments to it. So there is an evolution to it, or it does provide for the state of the times, such as the amendment for blacks with the right to vote and blacks become citizens, yada, yada. The second thing I want to say is that people don't realize that rioting is not nearly as effective as working through the democratic system, a system that people are, swimming the rivers to get into this country because we have that. second thing is, at the time it was conceived, or maybe several years afterwards, what other countries used parts or lots of, who else, what other countries used our Constitution as sort of a guideline, if you follow what I'm saying? So it was kind of a beacon of the free world. And France comes to mind, legalite, fraternity, and freedom, or whatever their three words are for their flag and so forth. You see what I mean?
All right, let's get a response. Jordan, thank you very much for that. And go ahead, please, Mark.
Yeah, as far as the amending process, I agree with you. Look, we have a process in this country for amending the Constitution. It's a difficult process, I have to say. As somebody who's leading an effort to do it, it's really hard, and I appreciate that. A lot of people lament that. I've been at this for 7 years now, specifically with the Convention of States project. We've passed in 15 states. We have to get to 34. Because sometimes I wish it was easier. But then I think if it were easier, we would change the Constitution willy-nilly way too often. It would swing with political opinion year to year, decade to decade, and that's not what the founders intended. So we do have a process. It can be done. It is normally done when the general public reaches broad spread agreement on a particular issue, and we want to make it permanent on a national basis. I'll give you an example of this. For example, you brought up the 13th and 14th Amendments, right, which, quote-unquote, gave blacks the right to vote and equal protection under the law. It's actually not quite true. I mean, you are correct, technically speaking, but it was really the Civil War that gave us those things. In other words, we fought a war, 600,000 people died. We decided we'd now come to national consensus, and we were never going to have that fight again. So we put a capstone on it with those amendments. The right to vote for 18-year-olds, we had that broad agreement across the country. The vast majority of people were ready to do that in the United States of America. We get the capstone. I would say today, for example, a balanced budget amendment and term limits, the vast majority of Americans, over 80% of Americans agree. We are absolutely ready for those amendments. So I think that's really important. Now, to go to your second question about the history and about other countries adopting, that's true. It's had a tremendously important effect on the world, our Constitution. Here's something that's unique, though, about our Constitution that nobody else has adopted. Nobody did it before and nobody since. Our Constitution grants some limited amount of rights to government. Our rights are not created by the Constitution. Most constitutions give citizens certain rights. Our Constitution gives the government certain rights to do things and limits them in everything else. In other words, what it is designed as is a weapon for the citizens to use against government infringement on their God-given rights. And no other country has copied that. There was no country in the world history that did it before and nobody since. I think that's the most beautiful thing about our Constitution.
All right, into the final segment of the program for today. We're continuing with Mark Meckler, the co-founder of the Convention of States Project. And on Constitution Day, let's go to the phones and welcome Chris. Chris, with a comment or question, please. We've got little time left.
Thank you, Rob. Sir, I wanted to ask you about the idea of structurally attacking our school systems in a way that forces people that write these history books and approve of what's in the history books, forcing them to adopt more of a pro-American stance for our children and for our government and teaching them properly. And also, I'd like you to comment on the idea of sacrifice that our country has used to protect the Constitution, and the fact that comes from Judeo-Christian ethic. And I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
Chris, thank you. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I love those questions. First, to the school system. The school system is the root of a lot of evil in America today. I brought up Woodrow Wilson, and if you go back into the early 1900s, he's the founder of the modern school system. John Dewey worked with him. We know Dewey as the creator of the Dewey Decimal System, how we organize libraries in this country. But he also invented what we call the factory system of education. What they're trying to do is educate kids to simply be cogs in the machine of state. And they're really good at that. And so it's a really good system for indoctrination. It's not a very good system for teaching people just how to think. They teach people what to think. We can fix some of that through textbooks. I think the important first step, and I'm going to go to Convention of States again, is to do away with the idea of a Department of Education. There shouldn't be one. There's no constitutional justification or constitutional power for it. And if we do away with that, that will devolve a lot of power back to the states. We also have an obligation just as parents, or even if you're not a parent, just as a citizen, to take control of our local school boards. School board seats often go uncontested. people like us don't run for them. We don't have kids. We think, well, what do I care? I don't have kids in the school. It matters, and it matters at a fundamental level for the future that we take over these school boards. And we can do it if we choose to do it. So I think that's really important. We get active. I'm going to go to the last one, which is about sacrifice, which is part of the Judeo-Christian ethic. It really is the sacrifice for the greater society, the sacrifice of your life to a greater cause. That's something that comes out of our Judeo-Christian ethic, the idea of service, right? So now I'm a person of faith. Jesus Christ was the ultimate servant leader. He led by serving. And that's something we have to do. In regard to our Constitution, the founders said that the Constitution is but a parchment barrier. And what they meant by that was not to denigrate the Constitution, but to say it's up to us to serve those ideas, to protect those ideas, to promote those ideas, or we're going to lose the benefit of living under a system based on those ideas.
Mark Meckler, if people want to get more information on the Convention of States project, if they want to contact you or become involved, would you tell us how we can do that?
Yeah, go to conventionofstates.com, and I'll tell you, with the election coming up, now is the time. Not just about a convention. We have a huge get-out-the-vote effort going on in all 50 states. So go to conventionofstates.com, get signed up, and we'll let you know how to get involved.
And Mark Meckler, thank you so much for joining us here on Constitution Day on The Schilling Show. Really appreciate it.
Go to conventionofstates.com, press the button, sign the petition. More importantly, get 10 of your friends to do the same. When you sign the petition, then that sends a letter to your state legislator. You go on the list in their district as a supporter. We deliver those lists to the state legislators. It means something to them.